I'm an art director and a graphic designer, which means my job is to make things, usually products, look pretty enough and interesting enough for you to want to buy them, even though you probably don't need them. And the theme for today is creators and curators. So why am I here today? Honestly, I don't know. I think any one of you here in the audience should and probably could be up here. And I'm not putting myself down here. Sure, I create for a living, and I've curated an art show or two. What I'm saying is that with social media, and with blogging, and with Pinstaface, and Instabook, and whatever else is out there, we are all curators of the media around us. So just by the fact that we choose to reblog or retweet or repin something makes us all curators. What I did do to get here, though, might have something to do with these girls. We got together and had some brunch, as you can see in this photo. And then we created a design collective called Quite Strong. That's not exactly how it happened. We rented a studio apartment where we drank cheap beer and worked on side projects. But when we did get together, we couldn't ignore the fact that we were all women in an industry that is dominated by men still. Most of our role models are still men. Here are 2 articles from Graphic Design USA magazine about influential graphic designers. So in the last 50 years, there were 2. And working today, the most influential graphic designers working today, just one lonely woman working today to influence graphic design. So sad. But this isn't just for graphic design. This is Fast Company's 50 most influential designers in America. Only 5 are women. And our bosses, our creative directors, more often than not, are usually men as well. So this is a number that's thrown around by Ad Age and a bunch of other sources, 3%. So 3% of creative directors in the US are women. I don't think the number is actually quite that low, even though there's even a conference for female creative directors called the 3% Conference. I think it looks something more like this. So out of executive creative directors, who are the people who will set the tone at an agency or a design firm, they'll veto bad work and they'll make sure that the work is up to par. I think it looks something like 17% women and 83% men. So all the other design collectives we'd ever heard of also strictly male. So we decided to just speak up, to empower our own voice and to create a website that curates other female talent, to engage our design community locally, and to empower the female voice globally, or at least try to. And what merit did we have to do any of this? Pretty much 0. We have a handful of art degrees between the 5 of us and an unfinished women's studies minor in my back pocket. But let me tell you, there's a good reason why it remains unfinished, because I'm going to take you through a day of studying advertising and feminism. So in the morning, I would go to my women's studies class, and I would learn about how evil advertising is. And I'm going to show you a clip that's a couple minutes long by a very famous feminist named Jean Kilbourne, who speaks about how evil advertising is.
Sometimes people say to me, "You've been talking about this for 40 years. Have things gotten any better?" And actually, I have to say, really, they've gotten worse. Ads sell more than products. They sell values, they sell images, they sell concepts of love and sexuality, of success, and perhaps most important, of normalcy. To a great extent, they tell us who we are and who we should be. Well, what does advertising tell us about women? It tells us, as it always has, that what's most important is how we look. So the first thing the advertisers do is surround us with the image of ideal female beauty. Women learn from a very early age that we must spend enormous amounts of time, energy, and above all, money, striving to achieve this look and feeling ashamed and guilty when we fail. And failure is inevitable because the ideal is based on absolute flawlessness. She never has any lines or wrinkles. She certainly has no scars or blemishes. Indeed, she has no pores. And the most important aspect of this flawlessness is that it cannot be achieved. No one looks like this, including her. And this is the truth. No one looks like this. The supermodel Cindy Crawford once said, "I wish I looked like Cindy Crawford." She doesn't, she couldn't, because this is a look that's been created for years through airbrushing and cosmetics, but these days it's done through the magic of computer retouching. Keira Knightley is given a bigger bust. Jessica Alba is made smaller. Kelly Clarkson, well, this isn't interesting. It says slim down your way, but she in fact slimmed down the Photoshop way. You almost never see a photograph of a woman considered beautiful that hasn't been photoshopped. We all grow up in a culture in which women's bodies are constantly turned into things, into objects. Here she's become the bottle of Michelob. In this ad, she becomes part of a video game. And this is everywhere, in all kinds of advertising. Women's bodies turned into things, into objects. Now, of course, this affects female self-esteem. It also does something even more insidious. It creates a climate in which there's widespread violence against women. I'm not at all saying that an ad like this directly causes violence. It's not that simple. But turning a human being into a thing is almost always the first step toward justifying violence against that person.
Yeah, so I would sit through, a lecture of that, and I would leave my women's studies class, my 19-year-old self, like, oh, stupid advertising, ruining all my relationships, making me feel bad in a bikini. What a bunch of assholes, right? So then this other really interesting thing would happen was that I would go to my advertising class next. I remember this very clearly. So one day I watched that video with, this ad for Budweiser where the woman's body's turned into a bottle of beer. And beer advertising, as well as tobacco, is sort of known amongst feminists for being the most evil. But then my advertising professor was like, check this out. Someone went and took and flipped the cap off a bottle of beer over, turned it into a crown. Now Budweiser is literally the king of beers. There's no boobs, there's no pretense, it's just a little bit of clever thinking. And that's what I learned, was that their advertising, some of the best advertising sort of comes out of problem solving and clever thinking. So I was totally hooked on this, and I was like, I'm gonna go change this whole media thing from the inside out. Instead of just being a bystander, Jean Kilbourne, and just commenting on it. And what merit did I have to do any of this? It was just young, dumb idealism at that point, I think. So now I'm happy to report it's all sexism-free, and I've fixed everything. You're welcome, everybody. Well, this is the truth. So this was the first big photo shoot I did in New York City on assignment at an ad agency. And I managed to convince the client to let me book a model that was a size 14, which is like almost unheard of, right? And there I was, changing the world, fighting the good fight, except that by the time the ad ran, when we finished retouching her to the client's liking, she was much smaller than a size 14. And then I did go on to do some evil beer advertising that didn't feature boobs, but featured an unnamed member of the NWA. But this is all just my perspective. Women and the way that they're treated in advertising is something that I'm really sensitive to. And other women may have other perspectives or other issues that they're really privy to. But I think the point here is that it's really important that half the population is represented in those boardrooms that decide which billboards we all have to drive by and which commercials we all end up seeing. Which is why when we created Quite Strong, we created a part of our website, ironically called the Lust List, where we curated a list of other female talent that we admired. So it was filled with, it is filled with photographers, art directors, designers, typographers, fine artists, and so forth, who both are able to highlight their work and also have a place to give a piece of advice to other female creatives. So it works both as a database of talent, if you're looking to hire someone, but also it serves as a point of inspiration and admiration that we believe is a little more easier to relate to than some of those design dinosaurs we're used to hearing about. We then went on to use the Lust Listers to curate some art shows. We did one with the Chicago Artists Coalition called Support, which to us was just a hilarious broad joke. But the work that came in was actually quite meaningful, and it sort of spoke to having a support system and being a part of one, and how important being a piece of a support system is. And this was my favorite piece by another female design collective out of Minneapolis named Cave Party, and it's just a giant friendship bracelet, which is awesome. And I think that that support was really important to us, especially in the beginning, because kind of all we had was each other for confidence. And we soon began being asked to speak at some smaller design conferences. So we did speak a bit about sort of the gender disparity of the people on stage, how there's always quite a bit more men than there are women. But the reality of it became a lot more clear to us when we were actually there. So this was a conference, one of our first speaking gigs in Cleveland. And the conference had 20 speaker slots, and 2.5 of them were filled by women. I'm counting us as one, because we only got one slot, and the half was a couple. But that's just a small design conference in Cleveland. The last AIGA conference, which is the largest professional organization for designers, the main stage was filled by 38% women. And there's sort of countless other examples of, conferences where the panels are strictly men or strictly white men. And this is getting better in design, especially in the last few years. However, it's a lot more prevalent in development and technology. And the ironic part about all this is that when I was watching the male speakers, I enjoyed them more than the female ones. And I think that it was because there was a shift in attitude. So for the most part, when a woman would get on stage, and this totally included us, it was all about giving back to the community, thanking her support system, basically attributing her success to everyone but herself. Whereas when a guy would get on stage, it was a little bit different. And there's certainly exceptions to this, but it sounded a little bit like this. Hey, what's up? This is all the cool work I've done. People really like it. Get paid a lot of money for it. Mic drop, right? Which I found more inspiring. Because I think seeing a creative talk about their work assertively and confidently, even if the work is whatever, is inspiring to me. And I don't think that I'm the only one, because the other day I went on the TED.com website and I clicked on most viewed. 6 out of 20 were women, so the majority men. Then it got a little more interesting. Then I went on, I clicked on most persuasive TED Talks on TED.com, and all men except for this little last square where Megan Kamerick speaks about women should represent women in media. Irony not lost on me. She literally talks about how there's a lack of female journalists, and therefore women are underrepresented in the media. Awesome. But then again, it's TED.com. It's not Tina or Tabitha or Tammy or something. But this got us thinking. We all know that gender roles exist and that they're taught at a very young age, right? So little girls are dressed in pink and taught to be sweet and caring. Little boys are dressed in blue and taught to play sports and be really assertive. Should we then, what should we do? As a society, should we learn to value more female-centric qualities in power positions? So when you see someone on stage being really caring and humble, should you learn to believe in that more, right? Or should we just teach women more assertive, male-centric qualities to get them on more stages and to get them in more role model positions? The answer is probably a little bit of both. However, we thought we could do something with the latter on a more local level. So that's how Moxie Conference was born. We got a grant from a local creative staffing agency, and we threw a one-day conference to inspire confident creatives. So it was full of like copyright lawyers, public speaking coaches, salary negotiators, just people to help our local design community make that cheddar and look good doing it. And someone pointed out that not everyone knows what cheddar is. That's money. If you don't listen, it's fine if you don't. It's just, you might not listen to as much rap music as I do. It's cool. So what merit did we have to throw a conference? We had no idea what we were doing. We had no merit. But at this point, we just had to like practice what we preach, and we're preaching assertion, so we just had to do it. And the very best part of it is that Moxie, the audience for Moxie, turned out to be 40% male. Because what is the fun in having a party and not inviting everyone? Also, that even though we're aware of these gender issues, that doesn't mean that we're like Amazonian women that are like riding around on horses, beating men with sticks. And we know that there's a lot more to gain by inviting men into this conversation. Which is why our tagline is Creatives of the Female Variety, because it's just a nod to the fact that women may bring a different perspective that wasn't there in the Mad Men agencies of yesteryear. Some of that perspective may be good, some maybe not so good, but it's important that that perspective is heard in some way that's relevant to the person speaking. Now I know what you're thinking. You might be thinking that you don't do what I do, right? You don't create visuals for a living that everyone has to see, so who cares? But I don't think that curating is just for art museums anymore. I think in whatever field or industry that you may be in, I think there's probably room for some growth, and there's probably some issues that you're privy to. And I think it's up to you to create and curate a change in a meaningful way to you, even if it's small. But even if you don't want to do that, there's always things like Pinterest and Tumblr and other blog avenues that help you hone your perspective and express it simply by repinning or reblogging something. But just like curators in an art museum that really carefully care for their artifacts, I think it's also important that before you hit a like button, you ask yourself a couple of questions. Is this coming from a conscious place? Are my ideals and my beliefs being represented here? Can I make a statement bigger than myself with this? Or am I just being kind of sucked into the thoughtlessness and the shimmer of the internet? You might think it's just a share, something funny you're sharing with a friend, but before they used to say that you have the power to vote with your dollar, but now you have the power to vote with something so much more powerful. You have the power to vote with your interests and your likes and your shares, and that has a huge global effect. And who knows how big your perspective can reach. I mean, it's not unheard of for blogs to get turned into books, to get turned into movements, and really any perspective in the right light can turn you into a curator as well. But what I wouldn't do is dwell on that question, what merit do I have to do any of this? Because it's either you guys, smart people in the TED audience, or it's those people posting YouTube comments, and they're not stopping anytime soon. Thank you.